Good morning. Welcome to Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. My name's Lorene. I'm back after 6 crazy weeks. Well, I guess for you guys it might even be 7 crazy weeks of traveling across Canada and back in our 1985 Volkswagen camper van. It's a very big story. Oh, I meant to clean my glasses. It's so foggy here. Well, it isn't really foggy here, it's hazy. We've had about close to 6 days of rain, and that's the best the light has been for a few days. And I know it's glary, I'm sorry for that, but we were just talking about how, was it our glasses that were foggy, or our eyeballs that were foggy, or just was there a lot of mist between ourselves and our eyeballs and the glasses and all the rest of it. So I'm not really sure. That looks a little better. Okay, so on our driving trip, a couple of weeks ago, I had a video where I was showing which books I wanted to read in which parts of the country, and I was reasonably successful with that, and you've heard about a couple of them. The last two that I wanted to talk to you about: The Adventures of Amina Serafi by Shannon Chakraborty. That's it. Well, you know what? It's a trilogy. Oh, you know how I feel about starting trilogies before they're out. This, based on the ending of this one, it might even be more than 3 books, because at the tail end, she's given a task that leads to future adventures. So that's possible that she might have more than 2 more books coming out, maybe 3 or 4. Anyhow, I love this book. I really enjoyed it. I think that it's worth all the hype that it's getting on BookTube. And what we've got is a sort of, well, I guess, I'm not actually sure how old she would be. Let's just say she's maybe early 30s. A retired pirate. Amina is at home with her daughter, who she has had in wedlock, which turns out to be a pivotal point later in the story, with someone who she has buried in a chest and left to drown. I mean, talk about simplifying divorce. I guess when you're a pirate, you can get away with those kinds of simple legal solutions. So anyhow, she has to go on an adventure. One of her old shipmates' daughters has been kidnapped, and by a person who is seeking out magical artifacts, and has a sort of megalomaniac, let's take over the world kind of approach. And the daughter of this shipmate is a scholar of these things, and so he realizes that she's more valuable to him as a scribe and an archivist than the actual artifact that he'd gone to trade for, and so he kidnaps her. And the grandmother comes and says, you got to save her, and if you don't, I'm going to ruin your family. So that's sort of the trigger point, and what Amina has to do is round up her old crew. And so this first book is world setting, and it's character setting, and we get to meet her shipmates, who are pretty interesting, and so the 4 of them come together, plus the ex-husband shows back up. Well, that's a bit of a spoiler, sorry about that. There's a great lot of adventures. As I would say, as many of them happen on land as happen at sea. Now, the cover is a bit of a giveaway too. Obviously, something crazy is going to happen at sea, and it's going to involve some kind of a creature. So I won't give any more details on that, but the cover does not disappoint. I think overall, I really enjoyed it. There were some pacing issues now that I know that it's going to be part of a series, I can understand why the beginnings were so slow. I was kind of like, come on, let's go, because I thought it was a standalone book. But now I understand the pacing. I still felt it was a little bit slow in the beginning, and I felt that there were a few more adventures that happened on land than they did at sea. And I guess, because based on the cover, I just expected a little bit more along the Patrick O'Brian sense of adventure, where they would be on board and there'd be some kind of, I don't know, like storm or pirate encounter, and that's not to say they don't happen, but some are more land-based than sea-based. So that was a small disappointment. I think overall I enjoyed every character, I enjoyed every adventure scene, and as I'm speaking, I'm realizing that one of my neighbors has decided to mow their lawn, a very wet lawn. Oh, or maybe it's one of those diggers that chops up cement. Anyways, it's noisy. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I would say that this book was a 4. The only reason it's not a 4.5 is because I'm now going to have to wait 2 and then 4 years for the series to continue. So that always takes a point off right away. If I had all 3 books in my hands, I would probably be giving it a 4.5. So I'm going to give it a 4, with the expectation that when the other books finally come out, because I will wait till they're all out, that when I reread this, I'll probably be a bit disappointed just because I'm rereading it. I don't know if that makes any kind of sense, but that's my logic for today. So I think in a way you could read this as a standalone. It's just on the edge of being a standalone. And I think if you're not as tied up in knots about the issue of series, you could happily read this and then, in 2 years go, oh, another one, woohoo! So, yeah, depends on just, how open-minded you are. So that was a good book, and that was read during the provinces of Alberta, Calgary. We were in Calgary for about 4 days for a conference for Steve, and we had the cutest Airbnb. And I think that I don't use Airbnb. I think I'm pretty sure that I use an app or whatever they're called, VRBO, which is more people renting out their primary residences or their secondary one, and so it's not like an investment company that's just got condos all over the place. Anyways, it was just really charming, and Calgary turned out to be a great success. And we went to Buffalo Head Smashed In Park. Anyways, that was really very interesting. I learned a lot. I just had this idea in my head that when First Nations people were causing the buffalo to stampede, that it all happened in one spot. And then when you get to see the geography of the sort of edge of the plains and the beginnings of the, what are those called? Foothills, and some of them are quite cliffy, you realize that doesn't make a whole ton of sense. There are multiple places, but where we were seeing was the spot that had the most number of bones at the bottom of this cliff. So the other thing that I did not realize, and once you go through the interpretive center, it makes a very good explanation about how this culling of the buffalo takes place, is the males of the buffalo are not with the females. So, I mean, I think a female buffalo protecting her young is a pretty formidable experience, not unlike a bear and her cubs or an elephant and her young. They are pretty fearsome animals, and so the only way you're going to get through the herd is to cause a riot. And so that's why they did this particular process of causing small little, what are they called? They're not ambushes. What are they called when a whole bunch of, it's not a riot, it's stampede. And so there would be a fair number of buffalo that would go over the cliff, but there was also way more than just a single family having done this, so that a large number of groups of people would be taking part in the aftermath. Yeah, so that was very interesting. And then, I finished that book in what was called Crow's Nest Pass before we got to Nelson. So there's all these incredible little curvy things that just get crazier and crazier as you get further and further into the mountains. And at that point, I think No, okay, I was still reading that book. I was trying to think when I finished that book. I would say I finished that book after the motor on the van died. It didn't really die. It kind of, I don't really know, shredded. We were at the top of a mountain, Nelson, BC, which we really enjoyed. And so there's a whole lot of pre-story that you're not getting, but it was in Nelson, BC, where we both said to each other, and this is in like the third week or third and a half week, going, this is starting to be fun. So on the day that we decided that this might be fun after all, we get to the bottom, and this road was something else. And later on, way at the end of the road, we were in the taxi going to the airport to come home, and the taxi driver was, asking about our story, and we were saying how we had managed to get to the bottom of that road. And he said, when he was a truck driver, that's the only road that he drove in New Brunswick that scared the lights out of him. And so, like, we didn't know this. Like, to us, these roads are all kind of mental. And we are getting to the bottom and to a place called Grand Forks, and going, oh yeah, we did pretty good. We did pretty good there, yeah. There are a whole lot of warning signs and places where if your vehicle is running out of control, you can kind of get off and catch your breath, or if you're losing your cool, you can catch your breath. There's like 12 miles where there's no stopping, and these roads are just going like so anyhow, we get to the bottom of Grand Forks, and I saw a Dairy Queen up ahead, and I said, would you like to stop for an ice cream? And he goes, no, I would really like a hard ice cream, not a soft one. So we were looking for a place to stop and get some coffee and possibly an ice cream cone. And he pulls into the Dairy Queen anyhow. And I thought, oh, cool, I'm gonna get a dilly bar. So, oh no, I like a Buster bar. It turns out that the motor had two lights go on, and neither one of them were the oil light. They were some other kind of overheating thing. And somewhere at that point, the power steering and power brakes just gave up. And so that we had an idea, perhaps that's the pulley on the motor. Well, yes, but the reason that the pulley on the motor had given up the ghost was that there's this little tiny piece of metal, like about this big and maybe about that thick too. It's just a ring, and it's holding something inside the motor to another part of the motor. You know that saying about, for the want of a nail, the horse was lost? This was kind of that story. So this little ring had over time just slowly been eroding. There were all kinds of metal shavings where it just slowly eroded itself to virtually non-existence, and finally just sprung. And that was it. The only way that we could get that replaced was to take the section of the motor out. In order to take that section of the motor out, they had to do a whole bunch of other stuff. And the fellow that we took it to eventually said, that piece, if I put it in just as a piece, it's just going to do the same thing. So we have to have a whole new motor. Can you believe it? Like, I'm so astonished that the entire motor rides on the back of this one little thing. Anyhow, we were in Grand Forks, and just up the road was one of the best mechanics. And when I say up the road, I mean 2.5 hours that we had to go by tow truck. So the van was on the back of a flatbed tow truck with Missy the cat was in the van because she wasn't allowed in the cab of the tow truck. She had a great time. She had the best views. And she's in the passenger seat where she's not really allowed. And she's like, I'm having a good time. So we get to a place called Summerland, and these people had made space for us in their schedule, and all the other mechanics were slammed. It was to the point where their messages were, I can't even talk to you, that's how busy I am. So we were so lucky that it happened where it did and when it did, and at the bottom of that mountain, and well, therein lies the rest of the adventure. Canterbury Tales, which was my intention for reading as we went through the Rockies. And I'm pretty close to finished. I'm just, yes, I'm in the Franklin's Tale, and this is a retelling by Peter Ackroyd. It's in modern languages, so it's not in the. So, like for instance, each chapter starts with a sentence in Old English. Here beginneth the Nugget's tale. So it's like here is Heere, and beginneth is Bigynneth. So it's that Old English language and spelling and vernacular. So instead, what Peter Ackroyd has done is turned it into contemporary English, which is really very nice. Let's trying to find a sentence. By wise generalship and force of arms, he had conquered the land of the Amazons, formerly known as Scythia, and wedded there its queen, Hippolyta. So, you can kind of get what's going on. Now, I've read this twice before in Old English, so as far as newness, that's not what's happening. But in terms of flow and getting the deeper details of the storyteller's tales. So for those of you who don't know, it was written by Geoffrey Chaucer, and he was on, whether he was actually on a pilgrimage or whether he just constructed that as the setting for his stories. There are a whole bunch of pilgrims going to a shrine in England, and on the way, each person is asked to tell a story, and we get a bit of background of each storyteller, and then we get their story. And at the end of it, there is one person who's been voted to choose the best story, and I think there's a big dinner at the end of it, and the person who's doing the choosing has offered to pay for this dinner. So it's like a feast is going to happen after this. So we get to know some of these characters quite a bit. I think it's pretty funny that one of the characters says, well, this is about storytelling. We're not here to listen to the priest preach. And I'm thinking, you're on a pilgrimage? Like, I would kind of think that a priest would be able to ramble on if they wanted to. It seems kind of like event appropriate. But anyhow, he was told to shut up. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on that's quite comical. I am enjoying it because it isn't a new read for me. It's a bit of a slower read. And based on what was happening in our travels at that point, there were times when rereading this was the right place to be. And, there was just so many decisions that had to be made. Were we going to fix the van, give up on the van, sell the van, fly back to Halifax, rent a car, which was extremely difficult to organize, continue on. If we were going to continue on, were we going to actually try and get to where we had planned to go, or we were going to revision the trip? So the only thing that was a consistent choice in all of that was that we were headed to see my sister on Gabriola Island, and so we decided that we wanted to at least achieve that. So we did eventually rent a car, and going from the 1985 van, which was not a luxury vehicle, to this rental car which had like the information for backing up. That's not in our kind of car. Like, our car is just barely beyond the stage of, the push down locks. We've moved to the next generation of car, but, just barely. So this whole car was all this electrical stuff. You don't need keys. You kind of click it to start. Anyhow, aside from sort of moving out of our comfort zone in terms of vehicles, we also had to start organizing hotels, which is really not any more complicated than organizing campsites, but the price point, oh my God, to choke on. So anyhow, we continued on our journey, and there were other times when I really wanted something new, something different to take my mind off of some stressful moments. So I could have used a second book to trottle on, but what we had to do was we had to take all the contents of the van, food, all the clothing and linens and stuff like that, all the things that, like our personal items that we needed, medicines and glasses and all that kind of stuff, and we had to shove it into the car because the people that were looking after it said, well, no food in the vans, we don't want mice. And just word of warning, the mice are going to really enjoy your linens. So get them into a tote. So anyways, the entire contents of the van, more or less, were in the back of this car. So we get to Rosh's and we've only got bags, grocery bags, baggies, green garbage bags, a couple of totes, with all kinds of loose items, the litter box, the cat stuff. It was insane. The banjo, my tripod, which is a whole other story. So we get to Rosh's and we need suitcases. Where can we find suitcases? So she takes us to this recycling depot where people also, it's like a buy and sell kind of a situation. So within 3 seconds, she finds for us a suitcase. And then about 5 minutes later, Steve finds a suitcase. Now, her suitcase that she finds is like this hot pink. The whole suitcase is hot pink and doesn't have a handle, but it has wheels. Steve finds one that's brown with orange and turquoise daisies on it. And then a little later, he finds a carry-on, black carry-on. So at the next section of the journey, we've got to get everything into these 3 suitcases and a backpack and a banjo and the cat's carry-on, which can only carry the cat. So the options for picking up another book were like, where am I going to put that? It was just such a bizarre experience in terms of what do we leave behind? So in the end, we got some totes and we put a bunch of stuff back in the van because we had to drive all the way back to Penticton, which is just beside where the van was being repaired, and fly out from Penticton. So we were able to go to the van and kind of recalibrate. And so we left a whole pile of stuff there in Rubbermaid totes, but we still had to get the rest of our stuff home. And the tripod, I had visions of doing videos, travel videos for you guys. There's a few people that I follow who do that as a regular part of their channel. I don't know how they do it. They're miracle workers. I don't know how you trek all this stuff along, find a place where nobody's interrupting you. Anyways, I had visions of having the tripod on the side of camping spots with my tea and my book and my knitting and blah, blah, and talking to you. And so I learned I'm not ever going to take a tripod with me again. I'm going to just take a little stand so that where you can get these things that make your iPad stand up. It's a flap thing that turns into a triangle. We learned an awful lot about ourselves and about traveling and about what's important and what isn't. I mean, people said it's going to be a life-changing trip. That pissed me off. I wasn't really interested in changing my life. I just wanted to go sightseeing. But in the end, yes, we had several illuminating moments. And I think one of the best ones is that we only lost our cool twice. And they were both on the days that we had to catch the big ferry. And the ferry between Vancouver and Vancouver Island. I don't do well with ferries. I don't know what it is, but I just kind of struggle to keep my cool. And by the end of the day, I'm usually a little frosty, and I sort of get into my own head in order to not, explode. And so in the end, each ferry day we had a little tiff, but they were small, and we easily recovered, and ice cream helped. So Canterbury Tales was semi-successful. Now that we're home, I have all my July books to go through, and I'll sort that out for next week's video. We should be back to normal here, as normal ever is. So July will be split between the house and the camp, and then August will be at the camp. And I have something in the nature of, I'm going to say 25 books to sort my way through to read for the next 9 weeks, I guess. And the other big excitement is that Phoebe, our daughter, is coming in by completely unexpectedly tomorrow night. So my reading has slowed down a little bit. I'm usually much further along in the number of books that I've read in June. How many did I read probably in the end? Less than 10? I would say less than 10. That's usually what I do in 2 weeks. So yeah, things are hopefully going to get back to normal with reading, and hopefully have a couple of books that are just a little more spicy. than Canterbury Tales. I think Canterbury Tales is spicy and it is comical, but if you're, it's one of those books, it's like, to me, it's like a little bit like Jane Austen. I don't always get the humor. And so this one is more of thinking about it afterwards and go, oh yeah, that was funny. Like, why did the priest get told to shut up? You know, it's that kind of thinking. All right, that's it for me. I hope all your reading dreams and adventures continue to come true, and I'll talk to you shortly. Bye-bye for now.